Body Brokers, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
You can't get answers in a tweet on Face the Nation. We try to separate the noise from the news. You need to be able to have an actual conversation.
Tonight, an in-depth look at the border crisis and the surprising details about those looking for asylum. Then, from blizzard warnings to dangerous flooding, the intense weather ahead. And could the grounding of a major aircraft affect your travel plans on the CBS Evening News?
They didn't have much of a ground game. This was not going on when he ran in 2016. Now he's got a much stronger ground game.
We all need to rise to meet the moment. This is a time of choosing. So let us choose the truth.
If January 6th didn't happen, you and I are sitting down having this conversation right now. But it did happen. And like I said, a lot of people are trying to whitewash it, diminish it.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. We are just 1 week away from the Iowa caucuses. On January 15th, the first voters in the nation will get their say on who will represent the Republican Party in the general election. Former President Donald Trump is currently leading the Republican field in both the Hawkeye State and nationally. CBS News senior and White House political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now from Iowa. Ed, good to have you here. What are you hearing on the ground from Trump headquarters in Iowa?
Robert, with 1 week to go, there's no question that the former president is in the lead. At this point, it's just a question, perhaps, of by how much might he pull this off. He told supporters over the weekend, act like you were down by 1%. Don't believe those polls that say we're 35, 40 points ahead. He may have a point, and it's probably a good thing to be telling people with a week to go because you don't want them to get complacent. But he's got plenty of people helping him out. We've met some of them in recent days. Let's start with a guy named Gary Loeffler, well known across the state to Republicans, somebody who's been showing up to Trump events since 2016 with his red tractor, someone who ran for Congress after Trump was elected and lost, and someone who showed up at the January 6th events in Washington, though he says he didn't go to the U.S. Capitol. We talked to him about his decision to become a caucus captain for the former president on caucus night. Take a listen.
Basically, as a caucus captain, you're going to give the 5-minute speech because all the candidates, if they have a captain there or they have a supporter there, they'll be able to give a 5-minute speech, kind of like you're in the bottom of the ninth and we're on the final coming around, right? I mean, hey, can they get the ball across the goal line type of mentality, right? Yeah. And so that's that last 5 minutes that someone that's maybe sitting there undecided, still sitting on that fence and goes, you know what? I like what that guy said. I'm gonna write Trump's name in.
So you got to be the closer.
Yeah, we're the closer. Yes, we're that high-paid relief pitcher in the bottom of the ninth.
But you've also got to be someone who puts butts in the seats, right?
Right.
That's part of the job as well.
Yeah, like we're calling people. We're trying to get more people to come to the precinct caucus. So we're that cowboy out the rodeo. We're trying to round them up.
You get the point. Basically, he is one of what are potentially up to 1,600 caucus captains the former president needs at these individual caucuses that are held all across this tiny state, with just a handful of Republicans in each one. Loeffler is also part of a handful of people who are spending time at Trump campaign headquarters in these closing days, trying to find those people to turn out. And again, you may think to yourself, well, isn't this what every campaign does? Yeah, but Donald Trump didn't do this back in 2016, and it's part of why he lost. Here, listen to a woman named Angela, but first another guy named John Goodrich, who's been with the former president as well since 2016, and provides a little perspective. What's the biggest difference you notice in his operation from when he first ran to this time?
They didn't have much of a ground game. This was not going on when he ran in 2016. Now he's got a much stronger ground game.
So what you're telling me is they're taking this a lot more seriously and studiously than they did back in 2016.
Well, they understand what a caucus is. It's not just walk in and vote. It's neighborhood get-together, and it is truly grassroots. And the caucus process is all volunteer, county by county, precinct by precinct. And you have to contact your precinct voters because turnout is the key.
So what are they asking you to do tonight?
So I'm making phone calls. There's so many people on here. I've been calling in my precinct, so I have a list of about 400 people in my local precinct, and getting them to commit to caucus for President Trump on that night.
The goal is to bring at least 10 people with you.
Right.
So what does the bell mean?
When you get somebody to commit to caucus. Yep.
So that's been going off a few times.
Yeah.
So that's not a guarantee they're going to show up. They're at least telling you guys we'll be there.
Right.
Okay.
And so every time you hear a bell, it's someone who has committed. They say, I'm going to come to caucus, and I'm going to support President Trump. So occasionally we'll have a few people that will say, I plan on attending caucus, and I'm undecided. And I said, that's fantastic, especially if they're my precinct. I said, I hope I can persuade you by what I have to say. So that's
Now you're just rubbing it in.
These young workers are intense, and they're competitive.
Have you found your 10?
I have 30.
You have 30?
Yep.
Okay.
30, and I'm not done. I'm going to keep calling.
So you get the idea. Again, this may seem typical in other states, Bob, but as you know, you've got to be able to go that surgical, precinct by precinct, county by county, street by street, to find every single registered Republican. 8 years ago, Donald Trump thought it was just about crowd size and big arena-style rallies, and he lost to Ted Cruz.
Ed.
The Trump team, and the DeSantis team would argue Nikki Haley is coming in too late to try to do what they've been up to for months. Now we've seen how the former president's doing it.
Ed, let's step back for a second. You've been on the ground in Iowa, and it's fascinating to see the operation for the Trump campaign. But you talked to someone who participated in January 6th. They said they didn't enter the Capitol, but they were nearby the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Yep. You have the former president out there in speech after speech calling those who have been indicted or imprisoned related to January 6 offenses or allegations are, quote, hostages. You have his rhetoric against President Biden escalating by the day, with threatening to indict and go after President Biden should Trump win the White House again. Are those issues, those statements, and Trump's legal challenges, which will come again to the fore this week, at all on the mind of Iowa Republicans?
They agree with the former president, many of them do, including Loeffler, that if you were a nonviolent participant in the January 6th insurrection, they should be pardoned. How would you define nonviolent? If you've been charged with something, then clearly you probably did something wrong. Unclear. But they hear him and they agree with him. On the issue of going after the Biden administration, they generally agree with that as well. And those are among his supporters. You talk to Republicans with supporting the other candidates, and they make arguments similar to DeSantis and Haley, that he may not be the best person to win a general election campaign for all those reasons you just listed. And yet, despite their consistent warnings, DeSantis and Haley's, they don't appear to be getting close enough to him to win next week, unless there's some organizational fluke we haven't been able to pick up on after weeks and months of having personnel here. So, you know, there's a reason he continues to say what he says this weekend, suggesting that they should be pardoned and calling on the president to do so, which he has signaled he would not do. It's because when he does it, he finds agreement, and it only sustains his support. And for the legal matters, as one woman said to me on Friday, Bob, the more they try to make him into a martyr, the more followers he draws, is in essence what many of these people believe. That all of these federal and state cases against him, the civil case in New York, are only going to help him because they believe Americans ultimately will come to his side, believing that he's being unfairly targeted.
And Ed, quickly, you've been covering Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on the ground. He's put such an emphasis on Iowa. What's his chance right now of coming in a strong second to Trump?
I still think there's a good chance he comes in a strong second, because what he has been doing, what Trump demonstrated, his team demonstrated to us over the weekend, his team has been doing that since the spring. It's been his super PAC, Never Back Down, this group that basically has not only done all that work, but transported him across the state, because he dumped all of his political money into this super PAC to allow it to happen. But they've been doing that spade work as well. And so when we spoke with him over the weekend, he continues to signal, I understand that in this state you have to do it methodically, surgically, find people door to door. And my team has been doing that. Therefore, I think that we're going to do better than the media, the pundits would believe. Based on our observations, yes, they have a formidable team here. Veteran operatives and observers agree they have done good work and the kind of work that needs to be done to perform well. And he says he's got more than 1,500 precinct captains for those roughly 1,600 precincts across the state. That would signal a serious operation as well. It's just a matter of who can turn out enough people a week from tonight, Bob, when temperatures are expected to be somewhere close to 7 degrees, the coldest in modern history for a caucus.
Iowans and most Americans don't want to do political activity in that kind of weather, but they're certainly getting motivated to come out, at least in some quarters, as you've been covering, Ed O'Keefe. Thank you for your reporting. Meanwhile, questions are swirling here in Washington about Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and his time in the hospital. He and other Pentagon officials did not report it to the White House for days. And in a statement, the defense secretary said he recognizes he could, quote, have done a better job ensuring the public was appropriately informed. A White House official tells CBS News President Biden is not considering having the secretary step down. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now. Nancy, always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. White House officials were pressed about this by reporters all weekend and on Air Force One today. They are expressing some disappointment in the way the Pentagon handled this. What more are you learning?
They are, Bob. On one hand, they're saying that the president still has full confidence in the Secretary of Defense, wants him to stay on the job. On the other hand, they're saying that the president respects the fact that the Secretary of Defense basically took ownership for his lack of transparency here. And they say that there does need to be a review, apparently, of process and procedure, because this is clearly not how this is supposed to work. They say that anytime a cabinet secretary is hospitalized, that information is supposed to make it up the chain of command to the President of the United States in timely fashion. And I have to say, Bob, we're now 1 week out from when the Secretary of Defense was initially hospitalized at Walter Reed. He was in the ICU, and it's still very unclear at this point how this could have happened. Even as we start to fill in some of the gaps about who was informed when, still hard to see why the information didn't make it to the White House for several days.
What is your latest reporting, Nancy, on what the secretary's condition is right now? And what do we know about how long he was out of the loop? Any new details emerging?
Yes, Robert. Pentagon officials say that he's still in the hospital, but out of the ICU. They say he is still having some discomfort, but they describe his condition as good. And we have no word about when he's going to be released from the hospital. And, you know, we still know very little about what it was that sent him to the hospital with such acute pain in the first place. The reason that all of this is so crucial, if we just step back for a moment, is that he is the Secretary of Defense at a time when the U.S. is monitoring and providing guidance to two countries that are in a state of war, Ukraine and Israel. And so the fact that while this information that the Secretary of Defense was in the hospital was apparently known to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff 1 day later, even to the Pentagon press secretary 1 day later, somehow that information did not make it from the Pentagon across the Potomac River here to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And that's why there are still so many questions.
Nancy Cordes at the White House. Thank you. President Biden went after former President Trump while speaking to voters in South Carolina today. His campaign spokesperson joins us next to assess the state of the president's re-election bid.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
You had a substitute teacher that was pretty popular. What was his reputation?
Everyone loved him.
You had to miss a test. What did he offer to have you make up the test?
He said that I can come by after school was all over and just take the exam. The blinds were down. He closed the door. The next thing I knew, he was right next to me. That's when I realized what was going to happen. Even if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me because no one was there. He told me that if I ever said anything to anyone, he would kill me and he would kill my family. So I did it.
Pledge of Silence, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. President Biden isn't holding back in his critique of former President Trump's actions during the January 6th riot. Here was Biden this afternoon in South Carolina.
For hours, the defeated former president sat in the private dining room off of the Oval Office and did nothing, absolutely nothing. His actions were among the worst derelictions of duty by any president in American history.
Biden campaign spokesperson Kevin Munoz joins us now. Kevin, thanks for being here. Both on Friday in Pennsylvania and today, the president criticized former President Trump and talked about how he believes Trump is a threat to democracy. Is this emerging as a central theme of your campaign?
Well, thank you for having me, Robert. This has been the North Star of the president's political DNA since he first announced his candidacy for president back in 2019. This is the battle for the soul of our nation, and that Donald Trump poses an existential and very real threat to our democracy. You heard that in Valley Forge, and you heard that today in Mother Emanuel, a site of a horrific hate crime targeting Black Americans. It's a critical message that continues to resonate. In the 24 hours after the Valley Forge speech, we saw $1 million alone raised online. So we're going to be talking about this issue front and center because democracy is on the ballot.
I was covering Mother Emanuel years ago at that historic AME church in Charleston the night of the horrific shooting. And it's such a place in recent American history that tears at so many wounds in our nation's history, intertwining not only the issue of violence and guns, but of course of racism, white supremacy. And now the president's also talking about American democracy. Can you speak to how President Biden is planning to connect these different themes and challenges in the country, racism, white supremacy, democracy, as he makes his pitch to the country for re-election?
Yeah, look, I think it's exactly what you heard on Friday, and it's exactly what you heard on Monday, is reminding folks that when we talk about democracy, when we talk about our freedoms, it is directly connected to your everyday life, whether it is Republicans trying to take away voting rights, whether it's the horror that Kate Cox has faced in Texas when Republicans have made it impossible for women to receive the health care that they need. These are all the issues that are related to our fundamental values as a country. It's related to our freedom. It's related to our democracy. He was excited to be in South Carolina. This state represents the backbone of the Democratic Party. They know the stakes of this election, and he's going to be taking it to the primary states. He's going to be taking it to battleground states because this election really will determine the future of those freedoms.
And South Carolina still remains the priority for President Biden's reelection campaign because you do have New Hampshire having a primary, but the president hasn't decided to participate in that.
Well, look, I think that the president was really clear back when we started this administration that we need to have a primary process that represents the diversity of our party. South Carolina Black voters pick presidents. We've seen that time and time again, and we are excited to be a part of that history and make sure that our primary process really reflects the diversity of this party.
President Biden was interrupted today by protesters demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. Is the campaign focused on that issue and how it's going to play out in the reelection campaign as they look to unite the Democratic coalition? And yes, it's anecdotal in terms of protesters at a singular event, but how is that issue more broadly figuring into the campaign's perspective?
Yeah, look, Robert, I think what you heard today was a president that is respectful, calm, and understands the diversity of viewpoints on what is a challenging, complex issue. You also heard from the church. You heard from people that have been directly impacted by hate crimes here in America, and you heard their steadfast support and their support for the president and his reelection message about democracy and freedom. So, you know, this is a wide, diverse party, and the president has been able to unify it time after time to deliver on big issues, and you're going to continue to hear him reflect that full party. And we have to look at what's on the ballot, because when you look at what Republicans think when somebody disagrees with them, they'd rather erase history, they'd rather ban books, they'd rather attack somebody's identity, and we are not that party.
Thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate you stopping by, Kevin, and come back soon. Thank you. We're monitoring breaking news out of Fort Worth, Texas. 5 officials are responding to a gas explosion that occurred this afternoon at the Sandman Hotel. Officials say there are at least 10 patients. There's not yet any other information on their condition. We'll keep you updated as we follow this developing story. Meanwhile, a former Capitol police officer who was there on January 6th is now running for Congress. He explains why he decided to get in the race. You're streaming America Decides.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's a country music legend, philanthropist, fashion icon, and now rock star.
I think there's a lot to be said about being comfortable with who you are.
Find out what's next for Dolly Parton when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happierness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. Former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn announced a congressional run in Maryland. Dunn was on duty on January 6, 2021. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian sat down with him to discuss his bid.
Why are you running for Congress?
You know, I've always believed in public service, and for the last 15 plus years of my life, I've dedicated my life to public service. And January 6th happened, and it exposed a lot that's happening in this country and what's happening right now in this time and place. I like to refer to it as the moment that we're in, and we see how sensitive and delicate democracy is, and also how close we were and are to losing it. I don't think it's a stretch of the imagination, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that we are one election away from the extinction of democracy as we know it. Donald Trump's words alone, his words, say that he wants to be a dictator. And at what point do we not fight back? I live by the phrase, until there's nothing that can be done, there's always something that can be done. And at my role as a Capitol Police officer, I believe that I've done all that I can do in that role.
But how did you get to that place?
So if you would have asked me before January 6th, would I run for office? The answer would probably be maybe. I would think about it. But that's after a full career at the Capitol Police, retiring at the age of 55, 57, and then mulling it over. But January 6th did happen. And I think that kind of pushed me to the forefront of thinking about it, even like, all right, this is going to happen a lot sooner than you even thought about it. An opportunity opened up in Maryland's 3rd District, and I'm stepping into my new role right now because I don't believe it's time to wait.
How are you hoping to distinguish yourself?
I guess we could say it's encouraging that it is a crowded field because that means people actually care. I identify with a lot of the same policies that the people that are running also. You know, running as a Democrat, I do believe that we need to have common sense gun reform. We need to expand and secure voting rights for all. Codifying Roe v. Wade into federal law.
Your new campaign ad really makes January 6th the centerpiece. Talk to me about why you took that approach.
You know, that's why I am where I am. Like I said, if January 6th didn't happen, you and I aren't sitting down having this conversation right now. But it did happen. And like I said, a lot of people are trying to whitewash it, diminish it, or erase it from history. And it's very important for people that believe in our country, that believe in democracy, to continue to stand up and not let people forget about it.
Do you think it will be a big issue in this election?
How could it not be? I mean, we're so close to the president being held accountable or not. I mean, look at the issues that got to go before the Supreme Court, and all of it stems from January 6th. So these issues that were going to become the law of the land going forward will be a reflection of January 6th. So how could it not be front and center on people's minds?
If you are elected and become congressman, done. If the former president is reelected and is President Trump for a second term, can a congressman done work across the aisle with President Trump?
Wow, that's a very good question. I'm capable of working with anybody that wants to work with the other side. Two people have to be willing, though. The problem won't be with me, and I'm just comfortable at leaving it there.
We're continuing to follow breaking news out of Fort Worth, Texas, where officials are responding to a gas explosion at a hotel. Let's take you now to our local CBS coverage from our station, KTVT. Go back to the top. Can we go back? We're watching these pictures right now from a reported gas explosion at a hotel in Fort Worth, Texas. We're still gathering information about this unfolding story. You're watching what we have acquired, different footage that's coming out of Fort Worth, Texas, a gas explosion. People are responding now to the scene. Our CBS News coverage will shortly begin to gather more about what's exactly happening on the ground. But this is a breaking story about a gas explosion in Fort Worth, Texas. KTVT in Texas with CBS will have more coverage in a bit. But you are watching pictures now of what is happening in Texas.
In front of us, when we talk about a 10 by 10 slab, 4,400 pounds, 4,400 pounds, just one of them. And you can see many of them have been blown out.
Exactly.
Several of them have been blown out.
And that certainly seems to be a point of interest for the officers.
Some steel beams also
those
that
beams
are exposed now.
Well, yeah, and then Jeff was saying, that's where a lot of the utilities are housed down there.
Down below.
Right.
So, and again, it makes sense. The call came in initially. as a possible gas explosion. Jason Allen reporting he's smelling the gas down there. We're seeing the Atmos crews there on the ground. And when you take a look at this damage, it seems all but certain that this was in fact related to some sort of a gas explosion.
And again, this is being considered.
Christina, can you hear me?
This is being called a mass casualty event. We do have 11 injured that we know of so far. One of them critical, 2 of them serious, and the rest, we're told, are minor injuries.
Yeah, folks, if you're just joining us right now at 4:32, the call came in sometime in the 3 o'clock hour for a gas explosion. We know now that there's certainly some kind of explosion did in fact take place there. We heard initially that there were as many as 10 people that are hurt. Our Jason Allen, who's on the scene, just confirmed for us that it is in fact 11 injuries. One of them is in critical condition, at least 2 others in serious condition. And again, a family reunification center has already been set up over at Sundance Square in case there's anybody who's trying to make contact with a loved one or friend, someone who they have not been able to make contact with, and perhaps they believe that we're supposed to be in this area or are supposed to be in this area. So that's certainly going on while crews down below, as we can see here from the chopper, continue to kind of scour through the area and try and figure out what exactly happened here. But whatever it was, certainly severe and just a devastating, sort of explosion there when you take a look at those windows.
Right, and for some reason that seems to be a point of interest, not only for the firefighters earlier, but for the Atmos crews now. And I'm trying to figure out why that would be, because it seems like it's just part of the front, the facade of the building that was blown out. But they were going at it with the chainsaws earlier and digging into it and trying to pry things from it. So it is curious. But yeah, again, this is the 900 block of Houston Street. Throckmorton is on the other side. So Houston and 7th. And this is the Sandman Hotel. And again, as we were mentioning earlier, the damage appears to be concentrated on the bottom 3 floors of this tall, very, I don't want to call it a skyscraper, but certainly a multi-story building, and also what's underneath the building.